A 5-year-long review of the Zoom H6. This is the Zoom H6. It's a portable audio recorder and it acts also as a USB interface. It has 4 inputs, at least the core of the device itself. There are an additional 2 inputs which I will show shortly where they actually go. These inputs are XLR combi inputs and they also allow you to input audio jack 6.3 millimeters. So the classical 2 music and audio cables are on the one side, 6.3 millimeter audio jack. The audio insulation is a little bit less compared to these ones, at least that's how my father explained it to me, but I probably forgot most of it. So these now are kind of the standard cables you use for audio recording. Guitars, for example, do not have these cables, but often they do have these cables. You might find some guitars also with these cables, but not so much. Now, there are a couple of different inputs, or rather basically slots on this device. So first of all, let's take a look at the right. We find 2 combination input jacks. Then we have an SD card slot, which can be used to insert a normal not USD, but a SD card. Now what I have in here is just an adapter, and this houses a micro SD card, mostly because I am using micro SD cards all throughout the different systems, and since my notebook, for example, has only a micro SD slot, and my phone as well uses micro SDs, I kind of decided to, once I had to repurchase SD cards, to go for the ones that are micro. And you get these adapters with them, so this wasn't really the biggest issue. You also have a volume control on this one side, so you can plus and minus the volume. There is also a on button and a hold button. The hold button is meant to secure the different buttons you find on there. On the bottom now, you have first of all an insert for a remote. This could be a 2.5 millimeter jack. I'm not entirely sure because I do not have a remote. Then we have a 3.5 millimeter audio jack for line out, and we have a secondary audio output, an output for the micro, not for the microphones, but for the headphones. Now, this can also be used to basically output 2 different audio signals to 2 different channels. For example, one could imagine on the one side monitoring the audio, but on the other side then outputting the audio to a phone, for example, which in my case kind of still works because I do on my Galaxy S10 still have an audio jack on the bottom of the device. So what I actually did with this device quite a little bit is I used it as a microphone and then used it to record audio and output the audio to this here, which then recorded on the native Samsung camera app. It was able to record the external audio. There is also a secondary option because this also acts as a USB interface. Because it acts as a USB interface, you can also connect it via the USB port. Now this is a mini USB port. These days mini USB ports are not found so much any longer, and this acts both as the power input, so this device can be powered by either now cable or also by battery. So you find 3 AAA batteries on the bottom here, and I have actually purchased rechargeable batteries, which seem to work somewhat reasonably in these devices. Sometimes there is a little bit of an issue with the voltage. One might find that camera flashes often have difficulties with the voltage on these batteries, for which reason it sometimes might not make sense to actually purchase rechargeable batteries. But I tried recording with this for now a couple of years in total, and just exchanging these again and again felt like a waste, and also it cost quite a bit, so I eventually decided to try these, and these seem to work quite well. So I bought these rechargeable batteries from Amazon. They are from Rev Power, and I don't know how much volts they have. Let's take a look. We have 1.2 volts and 2600 milliamp hours. Now, closing this again, we take a look at the rest of the inputs and outputs on this device, and we actually already went through all of them, apart from this one here. So what is this here? This is a really good question. I just asked myself, and the answer to this is that this is a proprietary connection point where you can actually connect a few different things. So with the device usually comes this here, which is a stereo capsule, so it contains 2 different microphones, and these 2 different microphones now to a certain extent are directional microphones, but they can also be made more or less directional. So currently they have an angle of 120 degrees on the one and 90 degrees on the other one. So apparently I was a little bit inconsistent in terms of using this. So this can be actually turned, and once you turn it, it then basically, well, is either 90 degrees or 120 degrees. So it picks up basically either 120, so that's about a third of a full circle. A full circle has 360 degrees, and so this is about half a circle, and then this would be 180, and 120 is then about this. So if I am recording now from here, then this is about what it would record in terms of what it would pick up. One could imagine, for example, a normal singing microphone, and a normal singing microphone usually has like a spheric radius of pickup, whereas this one here now has a somewhat directional input, but now it is 120 degrees. Only if one does not change it to 90 degrees. So if one again has the full circle, 360 degrees, and one divides it by 4, then one gets a quarter of a circle. And if I extend one arm like this and one arm like this, then I have about the pickup radius then this would have. Of course, now my arms are not really in the picture here, so it's a little bit hard to imagine, but this here is a 90-degree angle. So that's about the pickup radius it then has. This is about 90 degrees. Now this capsule sounds ridiculously good compared to other microphones. I, for example, have a Rode Lavalier microphone. It sounds ridiculously bad compared to this. I also used a Zoom H4 before, because my father used to have a Zoom H4, which was also the device I tried before and actually used every now and then, until I decided to get kind of my own audio interface because I wanted to record more video. And so I decided not for the Zoom H4. There was also a Zoom H4 Pro, but I decided that there is also a Zoom H5, which would be kind of the next generation, but also a little bit bigger. So it's not exactly that the next generation is kind of the replacement for the old generation in terms of these products, but they also are usually a little bit bigger. I think there is also now a Zoom H8, but that's then also kind of a different device altogether. So basically, it ranges from very portable audio recorders that are basically maybe half the size of this block, and they also have these capsules. Sometimes these capsules are not detachable. On the Zoom H4, for example, and also on the Zoom H4 Pro, the capsule is not detachable to my knowledge. I might think about this again, but on the Zoom H5, then the capsule already is detachable. Now, why would a company like this make the capsule detachable? First of all, this device is now quite big with the capsule. If I compare this to the Zoom H4, then it's a little bit bigger compared to the Zoom H4. I would estimate maybe it's 30% bigger or something like this in terms of the volume. Now, if I remove both of these caps, then we can see the proprietary connector, which is kind of this bluish color. And then on the other side, we see that there is this pin, or this very big pin, and then you press these buttons on the side. And once you press these buttons on the side, similar to a quick release strap on a watch strap, then you can actually insert this. Now, because this is now detachable, this also means there are different capsules which can potentially attach to this. And luckily for me, I actually purchased this when still one of the old capsules sold with this. And I have this now pocket in which I have multiple audio things, and in there one should find the additional capsule I have. And this additional capsule now I put in an additional bag, which did not come with the device. And this additional capsule now is kind of similar to a normal microphone. So a normal microphone usually is a dynamic microphone, which also often has a certain characteristic, which in this case is that it records kind of like a sphere. I'm not entirely sure. There are like different spheres, so the different spheres sometimes look a little bit different, but this is now what I also could potentially use. Now, I've used it a couple of times, and also I tried it for singing, and just for singing into the device. So one could imagine, for example, using this device, I again have this cap on. One could imagine using this device. So one uses one portion, basically, of the inputs as the attached inputs. So I could imagine, for example, singing from here, which I rarely ever do, but I could imagine singing from here, and then using this to pick up my voice. But then additionally, I would play the guitar, and then with a normal 6.3mm audio jack, I could then input the audio also into this. And this would then be able to record basically all of the different things together. Now, one could ask the question, what is the maximum inputs this device can pick up? And I think it's 6. I'm not entirely sure about this, but there is a capsule that sells additionally, which offers 2 additional combo XLR inputs. Now, these 2 additional combo XLR inputs allow you then to have 6 different lines in total. Because now I maybe should have informed myself before this. before recording this about this, but I think XLR can also transmit stereo, whereas these are usually mono. So there is a mono signal, and then there is also an insulation, and then well, that's about that's about it in terms of my audio knowledge. I also compared these two capsules, and I've listened basically monitoring the device. I usually listen just with normal headphones. These are Sony headphones I got from Amazon, and I thought these sounded quite useful, or sounded quite well. And what I'm looking for if I monitor my sound here is first of all portability. So for this reason I do not have basically a big headphone, but also I wanted to have something that sounds quite neutral. So I didn't opt for headphones, and these only cost like €8 or €12 or something like this. So I purchased them in total maybe a couple of times over the last couple of years, and one is dedicated for this year. Now I will also in maybe the last portion of the video go into how I actually use the device myself, but now let's turn it on and maybe go through a couple of different settings such that I can show you the rest of this device. Now, unluckily for me, this device now doesn't turn on because the rechargeable batteries apparently are out of battery. When changing the batteries, there is this textile pin or strap in here, and which you can use to basically pull them all out, but then you of course have to again lie it down to the bottom of this for you to then be able to kind of pull this again and to be able to output the batteries again. Now, because I have to recharge these other batteries, I only have these other batteries from Bonai from Amazon, which I bought kind of in between because, well, I only had in total 8 of these AAA batteries. Or these are actually AA batteries, so I also said it wrong in the beginning, and I can apparently never remember. I can only remember the micro and micron distinction. So we now have 2.8 milliamp hours, and these are now coming in at 1.2 watts. So this should be the same, and so the device should ideally turn on. But this now is also a test if in case you have other devices like this or other rechargeable batteries as well. So this is what it looks like if it turns on, and then we have this on the top, on the bottom. Now, in terms of the placement of the display, there are a couple of things that have to be mentioned. First of all, the Zoom H4 does have not an angled display, but a display that looks like this. This has advantages as well as disadvantages. The first advantage of this is that you can position it higher, but still be able to look at this. If you now want to record, for example, from here, because you're recording a conversation and you don't want to be like this, and you don't want to record the conversation at eyesight, then this would allow you to still monitor the device. Let's say you're using this as an external microphone, which would be quite heavy on a camera. Then what you can do is record with the camera, and since the camera is so heavy, you could record with the camera here or hold it out with a strap and then be able to still monitor the audio, basically on this device. So in these cases, this would be very useful to be able to look at this. But since now I have been using, so there are mostly two different scenarios in which one would be using the device. The first one would be if one uses these capsules. Now, if I'm using these capsules, then I'm using this as an audio source. If I'm using this as an audio source, and in addition I record myself, which I bought this device mostly for, then the problem is the follows. The problem is as follows. I am here. In order to record my sound, I have to turn this device around. Now I don't see anything. Now there would be potentially a couple of solutions to work around this. One would be to have a mirror or something like this, but I just never really find a good solution for this. So a couple of usage scenarios in which I use this device now is that I would be here and I would record the audio basically down here, for example. So I would position this under currently my notebook, and then I do not see the device. So this means now I have to have a solution in which I am able to turn this, or maybe turn it like this, or go like this in order to even monitor the audio levels. The second situation is that I would record it basically above my secondary screen. If I record it if I record with this here, so this is the normal audio capsule I used to record audio on here, and it sounds ridiculously good, also compared to, so currently I do have a Rode VideoMic Go 2, basically on top of this arm, on which I have my Galaxy S2, which I use, Galaxy S10, which I use to record, and not my Galaxy S2, which I use 10 record. Now, if I have this attached, the problem now is that, well, again, I cannot see the screen. Now, to solve this issue, at least partially, I turn this device usually around, which then allows me to somewhat peek through this device if I have it like this, and it records basically my voice from here, and then I would be... Now, a couple of problems with this. If you record, or I record, basically with me standing here, then this pickup radius is a little bit too large. Also because it's either below my notebook or above my notebook and screen. What this then usually means is that I also pick up the fan noise of my notebook, which then makes the audio kind of, well, not necessarily that more usable. Now, with the Rode VideoMic Go 2, which I have here, I could potentially also, so first of all, I could potentially use the Rode VideoMic Go 2 and input the audio into this device, then use this device to input the audio into I just had this idea, what if I actually had, what if this was a piece that actually for the video I just am recording is missing, and thus there would be no audio that is recorded, but the Rode VideoMic Go 2 is a USB mic that I basically have independently from this recording setup, basically connected to my notebook via USB then. So back to this device now. It's a handheld recorder, so for a specific situation, which maybe would be an interview, this could now be used to kind of record oneself. So one capsule is at oneself, and the other capsule is at the interviewer. So one could hold it like this. One could also maybe hold it like this, and this, and this, and this, but if one scratches against the device, then this would maybe be picked up. There is also a wind shield available, which I often had attached to this, but then the problem is that this becomes quite big. It's not so much it's still a handheld recorder, especially if you then have rechargeable batteries on the inside, because then you can be sure, of course also if you have normal batteries inside, but if you don't have the batteries inside and you try to charge it basically on the go, then you would have to have a mini USB cable all the time attached to this. And the mini USB, I mean, maybe there are mini USB cables which come kind of at a rectangular, or which come at a basically adapter with an angle, but otherwise this would be a recording situation that would be not very handheld any longer. There is also on this capsule, at least, there is an additional microphone input, but I've never been able to get audio through this. I don't really know what it is for. Maybe it's for an additional lavalier microphone, for example, but in my experience it didn't work. For some reason I couldn't get it to work. Now let's talk about the different inputs. First of all, we have a pad, and this can be activated on all the different channels. This pad, what it seems to do, at least based on my understanding of this, is it increases the decibels either by 20 or by 0. So basically, if you don't have it activated, which I currently don't have, or it's actually the other way around, it reduces basically the input signal by 20 decibels. I think it is decibels, but I'm not entirely sure about this. Now we also have these knobs, and with these knobs you can adjust the audio input. And this is something that is quite useful. On the Zoom H4, for example, you can also adjust, I'm not entirely sure how it looks, but this is something that's very useful. I think on the Zoom H4 you also have a knob up here, and then, or you need to select these manually, and then basically adjust the microphone level. But this is quite something, and on here you can just turn. The big downside now is that because you can just turn, I often find myself, even if I just have it basically on my desk here, even if I just pull it up, often the input level of the one I am usually using, which is channel 4, because of the position of basically these cables and this here, I am often finding that I rotate this and then I rotate it again. So it would be useful if there would be a lock function, which it is, but I again find myself rarely using these. Now on the Zoom H5, I think there is the locks for the knobs are a little bit higher or something like this, at least based on the images I saw. Now, you also have the option now to activate and deactivate all of these different channels. So, because this capsule, the stereo capsule, is basically one, the stereo capsule can only be turned on and off together. These other channels, because they are, I don't know if they are mono or if they can also be stereo, I think they also can be stereo, at least based on the assumption that this is also be able to record stereo sound or transmit stereo sound, and normal XLR cable, but I'm not entirely sure about this. Now, one has one, and then one can also, so why can 1 and 2 now only be activated and deactivated together? I have no idea. And this is something I think I have, I did realize before, but I'm not entirely sure why this is the case or why it works like this. Now, we have also 3 and 4, and 3 and 4 can be activated basically. These are the only channels that can be activated singularly, or basically on their own. Now, if you want to record onto this device, then first of all, you have to... Now, there are a couple of different situations now with recording. First of all, if you don't record on this device, but you're using this device as an input, and the recording actually happens somewhere else, then I think it transmits usually the full signal. This now means, or could mean, that I don't have to pay attention to the bitrate and so on. But I'm not entirely sure about this. I am just speaking on what I've used this for in the last couple of years. I rarely use this to record audio onto this itself. Mostly because I try to record basically as fast as possible. I try to basically make video after video in terms of video recording without then syncing the audio files and without realizing, okay, the audio file is 10 decibels higher or lower. So what I'm usually doing is I'm using this just as an input, and then I would have, in the past, I would have a phone, and this phone would be basically connected via a aux cable, 3.5mm output, and then here input. What you additionally need is a TRS to TRRS adapter, because otherwise the audio jack on the phone basically is not connected properly. So you need this adapter, which is a very simplified very simplified explanation. Or I would have connected it via USB-C. And if I have, not USB-C, but USB. If I have it connected via USB, then I would have here a USB-C adapter, because this has a USB-C port, and this USB-C port then goes out to a adapter. So I would have used either the Samsung adapter, which is basically from USB-C to USB-A, and then I could have a normal mini USB cable, which I luckily had a couple of them, to USB-A, and then I would be able to connect the audio directly onto the phone, at least with the Galaxy S10 and the Samsung camera software, or the Samsung camera, which is the normal camera software that is already installed on a Samsung phone. Thus also the name Samsung camera, if I haven't talked too much about now this particular point. There also are settings, and within these settings now you can decide a couple of things. First of all, let's take a look at the main settings, and then maybe into a couple of settings I have used before. What I have used before is the compression and the limiter. What I've also used before is the phantom power if I had additional microphones connected to them. I think dynamic microphones do need, no, it's not dynamic, it's the other ones. It's the condensator microphones that need phantom power, but I was also not entirely sure about the type of the microphone I had. Maybe I should have listened to my father and the audio explanations he gave me a little bit longer. There's also a tuner and a metronome, and then date, time, backlight, battery, software version, factory reset. You can also change the date and time, and then you can also go to English, SD card, remain, format, performance test, and that's mostly it. And then you go back to the folders. So because this is a audio device that also stores audio locally, you can also listen to this, and this also has a speaker, but since I do not have anything recorded, well, the speaker is actually not that bad. It's to be expected that it's not that good either, but similarly to maybe a phone speaker, or a little bit more terrible compared to a phone speaker. Now, in terms of the recording format, I rarely ever change this, but currently I have it set actually to MP3, because I used to record mostly study scripts with this onto the device, and then basically have the study scripts already in MP3 in order to be able to then transfer them to my phone and listen to them. Now, there are also other rec formats available, and these ones go up to CD quality, and CD quality is usually this 196, let's take a closer look, 16-bit and 44.1 kilohertz. There is also a 48 kilohertz version available, also at 16 bits max. Oh, there is also a 24 bits, which I think then is the max. I don't know what CD recording is. I think it's 44.1 and 16 bits, but I'm not entirely sure about this. Now, what I mean with CD recording is that that's the usual quality a CD would come in. Not ACD, but AC/DC. There are also a couple of other functions. You can use this to record one track and then listen to the track while recording the next track. This is called dubbing, and this is a feature I have sometimes used in the past. Now, I began to realize that it would be more useful to have this dubbing feature already available, while basically also being able to basically select the tracks that are playing and not select the tracks that are playing. So I've used this a couple of times. I try to basically record maybe a guitar, and then maybe sing over it, and then maybe do a second voice over it. And this whole project then took like 3 hours, and I then had multiple audio lines, which I then needed to synchronize or store, and then there are like these multiple files. So what what instead I did, instead of trying this a couple of times again, but of course now this device was the thing that allowed me to do this dubbing. And because it has because it has already 4 inputs, this is quite something. So I think you can also basically have 4 inputs on the first layer and then 4 inputs on the second layer, but I'm not entirely sure about this. So because this got quite complicated and mostly time intensive, because you also had to basically edit this in post, what I did instead is so based on their approach, what if I basically can record live? So everything I say is basically one-to-one already video time, and then I play, and then I stop the video, and then the video would be done. And what if I could also do do this for music. And so this is the reason I actually then got a loop station. This is a RC300, and now this already goes into my personal usage of this device. Now, how do I use this? And also maybe going through the additional couple of options. There is the rec button, which you can press, and then it records onto the device, and then basically, well, it records. You can also stop the recording. You can also pause the recording. I think if you press this button again, it also stops the recording, and then you can also skip basically in a recording or to the next recording you already have stored. But I rarely ever find myself basically going through the recordings on this device. I did on the Zoom H4 I had before, because me and my grandfather and mostly my dad recorded basically us already, and so I went through a couple of these recordings back then, mostly guitar recordings. But it is quite, there is a naming problem, and this naming problem is as follows. Similarly to how a Canon camera, even in 2024, records one picture with a number sequence, and the next picture is the next number sequence, and if you exceed 10,000 pictures, for example, then the number sequence, if you import them, and then basically you start again on the camera, it just starts the number sequence again, instead of maybe using the timestamp, because that's the unique thing one could use instead. But this device also doesn't do this, so it says Zoom 0001. And if you exceed 10,000 recordings, then basically you have the files, which would be then, if you would move them into one folder, then Windows Explorer would ask you, would you like to replace those files? And then you don't know if these are actually the same identical recordings, then you have to compare them, and so on and so forth, which could be solved if these devices just would implement a timestamp, but maybe there's some issue with this. So, in terms of now my own usage of this device, I used to record only on this device. I also used to do the compression. So there is a limiter as well as a compressor. There are actually a couple of more things which we can take a look at. In terms of audio processing, that already happens on device. So first of all, we click on compressor and limiter in the options, and then we can select either track 1 and 2, either track 4, 3, 4, or all tracks. So 1 and 2 are linked, and basically also, well, that's actually, I don't know why 1 and 2 are also linked. That's quite a mysterium. So only 3 and 4, also in terms of turning them on and off, can be basically used to record singularly. So in the beginning of my video recording career, which still hasn't resulted in any success whatsoever, I used this to record with this device already in compression. Now, compression, what it does is it makes the voice and also maybe other instruments already sound more like they would be finished. So they would sound more like they would be played on radio. Especially with the voice, there is a certain sound compression has, which just sounds a little bit better. It sounds like muesli. It sounds like crunchy, but for the voice, maybe to have a very bad explanation now for this in this video. So first, I use this, turned it around. I use this with this on, and I then, as I already mentioned, either with the audio jack or with the USB-C, but the USB-C connection was a little bit unreliable because I, through some other action, basically damaged the USB-C port, which meant that every second recording I did was basically lost because it didn't have audio, because the connection was not properly done. Now, could you connect this maybe via Bluetooth or something like this? Even the best microphones today, so for example the DJI mics, I think the second or third generation now has Bluetooth connection, but it seems to be that the Bluetooth connection just does not provide enough bandwidth, or there is some other issue, which results in, even with the newest DJI lavalier, not lavalier mics, but there are microphones which are wireless and you can attach them, whereas lavalier mics are usually wired, which you can synchronize basically to an Android or an iPhone. But then, and this also is picked up by the camera app then. But the problem with these is that the audio is just terrible, and you listen to it and this is not an audio you want to publish anywhere. So, usage scenario 1, this and directly to the phone. I then, over time, figured maybe recording on the phone is a little bit of a problem, mostly because of the following. If you have, basically, the camera records, and the camera records over something that is inputted into the device, but you also want to charge the device at the same time, then the charging current or the charging power, I don't know which of these, or maybe it's also the voltage or all of them combined. So there seems to be some effect that is happening that influences how that basically results in a noise signal that is also recorded onto then the video, the final video. Now, for this reason, I could only basically have by which connection, so both connections would work, but I could only have recorded I could only record audio with this to this if the phone had still battery. And after 2 hours it ran out of battery, and then if I wanted to record some more music, videos, then I would have to recharge the phone fully again. And because the battery on these devices is maybe at max a day, and so I had quite a little bit of problems with this. So I wanted something that would be more stable, and thus I have now experimented in the last couple of years with a couple of different setups. The first, or the latest one, I will now explain. So first of all, I have a Galaxy S10 here. This Galaxy S10 does not record any audio, but via OBS Studio basically sends the audio, not the audio, but the video signal to OBS Studio. OBS Studio is a streaming software that is free and that is open source, I think, at least to some extent. And with this, I now have the video feed. Now, in OBS Studio, I can also add an audio source, and now I have the Rode VideoMic Go 2 connected to this. This is now the latest iteration, so on my computer, basically both signals are spliced together, and then I can press start and stop, even with my keyboard here, and this then starts and stops the video, and then I have the file already on my notebook. And recording files on a phone is great, but eventually, if one wants to optimize a process like this, like video distribution, then also I was just, the problem is that the connection from a phone to a computer is just not that good, and maybe it's still bottlenecked by basically, maybe it's, so there are basically these different USB standards, and I think the third generation has 5 gigabits, and then there is 3.1 USB-A or USB 3.1, because this can also be implemented with USB then, with USB-C then, and so I think on these old phones you don't have even a USB 3 connection, but usually USB 2.0 or something like this, which then in terms of the connection speed is still not that great. And so I found myself transferring files again and again, and this took quite some time out of my week. So the solution in which I already record onto the hard drive seems to be the better one. Now, because the audio is so superior, and also because I did not have the Rode VideoMic Go 2 before, I have been using this device. And also I have been using this device to record basically on onto OBS Studio. And before, I've used it to record directly onto my phone, in this case again the Galaxy S10. Now, the audio sounds better, and also I'm still using this device now to record music. So, but because I wanted to have basically my hands free, as well as be able to monitor the audio with this display, while basically being speaking, but I actually don't right now, because in OBS Studio I also now have levels like these, like the ones that are showing on here. But the main problem is that, so I have these two different workflows. The first one is for music, and for music I have this here, the loop station connected to this here. And then I record everything through the loop station. I have a microphone, a normal dynamic microphone, which I use to record all the guitars, which I don't have a connection for. So sometimes the guitar does not have a microphone built into the guitar, and then does not output audio, and for these I use this microphone. And then I use it basically as input. So this is the microphone, then I have one output. So this is the, it's only mono because it seems to be simpler for me. And then I also have the input, which in this case is one camera, not one camera, but one guitar cable. And now the output goes in this case to this device, which is actually this one. And then I also have it connected to power. And then I also have an additional microphone connected, because I previously used basically sometimes a microphone instead of the Rode VideoMic Go 2, which I now have, which is a USB microphone. But before I basically used this, then it went through the loop station, and then through the loop station. So basically I have two microphone cables. The first one would have picked up the microphone if it was here, but since I only have one microphone, I sometimes basically detach the microphone and then had it up here. But because it's a dynamic microphone, this did not make the most sense, because a dynamic microphone needs to be spoken to maybe in this distance or this distance. But again, a directional microphone like the Rode VideoMic Go 2 is also able to pick me up at about 1 meter of a distance. So this is the one workflow, the video speaking workflow. Now the other workflow is for music production. What I'm currently doing is I have a couple of guitars here in the back, and these couple of guitars then are recorded either with this microphone or with this connection here, and then go through the loop station. On the loop station I can loop these different things, so this means I can record something, but then add another layer onto it, then stop the first layer, and so on and so forth. And then I record, basically I don't record it. I use this only as a USB interface, and this then is also connected via USB, so this provides power as well as USB. And this then goes to my notebook, and in OBS Studio I then have different scenes. So in OBS Studio you have either profiles or scenes, and I have different scene collections, and one of them is music, and this then has basically this device as the audio input, and then I can record what is being done, or what is going through this device here. I could in addition actually record multiple lines also from this here, but I find myself rarely ever using this. So I put all the inputs into my loop station, then I'm able to loop it on there, and then it goes just via the USB-C or the functionality of of USB interface. It goes through the Zoom H6, and the Zoom H6 then inputs it into OBS Studio, and then I get the video feed again from the Galaxy S10, and then both are merged as soon as I stop the video. And that's how I basically record currently. Potential other usage scenarios. I already tried mounting this onto my camera, but the problem is that you then have to have an adapter and it has to fit on your camera, and also this is almost as heavy as my camera with a lens, and also it's quite big. So the problem is then that this is just a ridiculous setup. I mean, it would maybe work, and since it was the only proper audio microphone device I had, this would be something that would be useful, at least in the past, but I found myself just getting this together, and then the output, and then this needs to be charged, and so on and so forth. So I actually bought the Rode VideoMic Go 2 initially to have a proper microphone on my Canon EOS M50, which is the camera I'm using to record pictures and videos. But then I found, what if I can actually record also videos with this? And so now the microphone is always up there, and I don't again have a microphone for my camera. So I could again use this, but this then, because it is used as a USB interface, and because I so often record videos where I then have no audio because of some failure in me connecting all of these cables together, and then I didn't remember to select the proper profile on OBS Studio, and then I have the music profile instead of the under profile. This then results in no audio, and since I wanted to reduce basically how much videos I recorded for maybe an hour that don't have audio, which is basically totally wasted time, then I decided to just have this in this setup as long as I can have it in there, or ideally always. And so this is how I am using the Zoom H6. Let's sum up what we discussed so far, or maybe also add a couple of additional details. The Zoom H6 is a portable audio recorder. It is I think the best portable audio recorder that also allows you to have kind of the maximum studio setup, if at least a very small studio setup, if you don't want to purchase a proper USB interface that would be then this big. So it fulfills both of these functions, even though the portable function is not really that useful, but in theory at least it is useful. So if I wanted to record, for example, myself and my grandfather playing guitars, then I could also use this. And I could put this onto a stand. I could put this also onto a microphone stand, which I have my Galaxy S10 attached to. And this is a device I could still basically use in a portable scenario. Also because this capsule is now detachable, I can basically just detach this, and then it actually fits into this microphone bag, or this Zoom H6 bag I have. This is not specifically for the Zoom H6, but I'm still using this for this. Price. This device cost around, I think, 350 or 360 euros. And also the automation of my lighting again sets in. Now, this device cost about 350 to 360 euros, I think. The device I purchased before cost about the same. Now, because this old device broke, I actually was thinking maybe I should, now, I actually then sent this into basically the guarantee already was over. And so, because the guarantee already over, the repair would have cost me something, and I think it cost me around 250 euros. So I could have sold the device, the old one, basically as damaged device, or I could also get it repaired now and then maybe sell it for maybe a little bit more. So I decided first of all, I decided to purchase another one, mostly because I wanted to, in the next couple of weeks, also to be able to record audio and video. And then, so I did not want to wait this long, because at this time I daily recorded maybe an hour or two of video. And so I got a new one. I purchased this device, which then also happens to fit more into my color scheme of trying to have black things. And I also got this old one repaired, and eventually gave it to someone else. So I again now only have this device. Now, what is broken on the old one is, I think, the main board. But from maybe falling down 2 or 3 times, that the main board is broken after 2 years. Also maybe not the best in terms of durability. But if I expect that my camera, for example, would not be breaking if I threw it down 2 or 3 times, then this would also be something that. So if I throw my phone down, I already kind of expect it to break, and the screen might be broken, for example. And so the same goes for other devices that are that sensitive, I think. So it might have been me, and thus the device broke, and thus I had to get it repaired. The additional capsules allow to either use it as a dynamic microphone, or use it basically in an interview style, or use it with these 2 different angles, which are 90 and 120 degrees. But one can also use these 2 additional capsules, or 2 additional combo jacks, to attach them. I usually don't have anything else attached, mostly because I'm using it as a USB interface, which I use to record my loop station, or to basically